I started to notice that my patients, if I could get them on a low carb and a ketogenic diet, often their joint pain would go away, which was the first sort of interesting thing that I had noticed. I myself went on a carnivore diet back in 2016. I wrote a book about it, published it in 2019. Was on Joe Rogan's podcast in 2017, talking about this. And since that time, we have seen tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people take on the carnivore diet. And very often they see tremendous improvements in health, and often many of them put diseases in remission. They come off all medications, which is really what's my passion as a physician is about, is trying to cure disease if possible. I have, as you mentioned, I've been doing a diet that pretty much consists of primarily just steak for about 9 years now. And I am now almost 60 years of age and still performing at a very high level. I mean, I'm out there sprinting and dunking basketballs and lifting heavy weights and, setting world records in rowing. And so I have managed to show that this can be something that can be used at all levels of health and performance. But again, my main focus has always been on the people that are sick and trying to get them better, because that's what it's ultimately about. And whatever diet you prefer, it's up to you. But I'm here to tell you that meat, and particularly red meat, is generally quite healthy. And despite the fact that we've been told to avoid it and that it's bad for us, that clearly is not the case.
Yep, 100%. So you pretty much been eating steak for 9 years, feeling great, breaking records. But coming back 8 years, or 9 years, what made you realize that only eating meat made sense from a nutrition standpoint? Because not many people talked about it back then, right?
Yeah, so when I first came across a group of people doing this only all meat diet, I thought it was quite crazy, like everybody does. I mean, it's just, the questions would be, well, what about things like scurvy? What about, vegetables and fiber and what about all the saturated fat? On paper, it did not make sense, because we've been trained to think that red meat is bad for us and that vegetables and things like that are essential for health. But I was open-minded enough to realize that, people were thriving in many cases, on low carbohydrate diets. And I was less convinced about the dangers of saturated fat as other people seem to think so. So I was open-minded enough to at least try it. And once I tried it, and I tried it for 30 days back in, like I said, 2016, I was really blown away by how much better I actually felt. And, that's important. How you feel is very important in many cases. I mean, that's why we do many things, so that we can feel better. As I looked into it more and more, and did more of the research and looked at what was known both in medical knowledge and biochemistry and human physiology and human anthropology and evolutionary science, it's starting to make sense that humans are and can be very carnivorous, and at periods of times we were almost exclusively carnivorous for certain segments of our evolutionary history. And that, coupled with the fact that people are clearly getting better. I mean, putting long-term, lifelong diseases into full remission, sort of gives more and more credence to the fact that meat is, in fact, particularly red meat, I think is honestly a superfood, if we want to use that term. I know that's used for a lot of things, but honestly, just from the sense of what do we need to consume as a human being to acquire nutrients. And, basically what we need are basically amino acids. We need essential fats. We need a source of energy, which could either come from carbohydrates or fat. We need some vitamins, minerals, and arguably water. And beyond that, we don't really need anything else from our nutrition. And meat literally fits all those bills, and very nicely. I mean, this is something that you could live on indefinitely with nothing else. And I see people that do that quite frequently. I mean, when it comes down to what do we need, basically. And we consume a lot of things that we don't need, obviously, in the modern diet. The modern diet is horrible, probably the same thing in Brazil as it is in the U.S., and getting worse. So, yeah, so it's interesting to see how this has played out.
I believe so as well. It's pretty interesting to hear from a lot of doctors all around the world that when people join a carnivorous diet, and I've interviewed a lot of doctors in Brazil as well, and they say the same thing. My patients, they go in a carnivore diet and they feel better being a psychiatrist or just a doctor that deals with autoimmune diseases or something like that. What kind of diseases do you see in your practice there in the US that people are getting better from
Yeah,
when joining a
gosh.
carnivore diet?
Yeah, I mean, I could literally list hundreds of different conditions, but in general terms, we see metabolic diseases like diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, the general metabolic syndrome resolve quite commonly. We see a lot of autoimmunity, and these would be things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, myasthenia gravis, multiple sclerosis. Those things often get better. Now, I want to caveat, not everybody gets 100% better. Many people do. In fact, the majority of them get significantly better. But there are some people where, it takes more than just diet to improve that. We see just in general inflammatory conditions, things like just general arthritis, the old osteoarthritis often improves. We see a whole host of mental health conditions get better, everything from depression to bipolar disorder to anxiety to schizophrenia to schizoaffective disorder to PTSD to ADHD. All of those things often improve significantly. People's moods in general just improve generally, provided they're eating enough and they're eating enough fat and they're eating enough calories. Generally, we see a significant improvement in mental health disorders. I've seen even weird genetic disorders get better. Things like there's a disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder where people often have very hypermobile joints. Their joints sublux or they dislocate, and that stops happening when they go carnivore, which is quite baffling to me. I still haven't figured out the mechanism by which that works, but it does seem to happen. So I could list, literally, I've done that before. I've alphabetized from A to Z all the diseases that I've seen get better on this diet. It's pretty amazing.
Is that in your book or is that in a website that we can get a hold of? Because I would love to translate that and give it to the audience.
Yeah, my book catalogs a lot of this. Now, obviously, that book I published in 2019, and so in the intervening 6 years, I've seen a lot more, and more to come. And there's been now scientific papers published, case series on inflammatory bowel disease, mental health disorders, eating disorders like anorexia, which also get better with this. And more studies are coming. I'm aware of several that I've helped to get off the ground, and so we'll see more research coming out in the near future. My website, carnivore.diet, we've cataloged well over 1,000 testimonials, full interviews in many cases of people that have put all these diseases into full remission. It's quite impressive.